Hi, folks. This is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report. You know, I was reading a book that I talked about. It was Mike Seymour's book, The Smart Guide to Freshwater Fishing. And I was reading that, and I was thinking back to what fishing was like for me as a kid. And I think this is really critical that I share this with you, because I've got to tell you, I am no less enthused, excited, an addict of fishing than I was as a kid. It may bring me a lot of different things than it did then, but I keep thinking back to what fascinated me so much as a kid, and that was being on my grandmother's dock, looking down into the water. Now, I'm talking about when I was 5 years old or something like that, a long time ago. And I was at the end of the dock looking down, and there's a school of perch and probably some sunfish there, and watching them just fascinated me. And then just taking it another step, being allowed to have a tiny little pole with probably a worm dangling down in the water just in front of me, and being able to watch those fish. And then to see one of the bigger ones, the bigger perch, move in and watch that, and then to have it make a beeline for my worm. That was the most exciting thing of all, to think that that big one was going to take what I had down there, to watch him open his mouth. I said his, I don't know, it's probably a female fish, but open her mouth and ingest that worm. That was the ultimate of excitement for me. So what am I really talking about here? I'm talking about the enjoyment of the visual, how actually seeing and watching something happen. I think even supersedes is more important than the feeling, the hearing. All our senses are important. But in fishing, seeing it, I think, enhances the whole experience. You know, in today's world, the seeing has become people that have money, that have all these graphs and charts and screens in their boat, can look at their lures that goes down, and they can watch. They can actually see the fish come up and hit. And I think this can be, I've talked to my buddy Dave Swanson about this, as he's perfected his skill of jigging for lake trout in Cayuga Lake. And it's him watching his bait go down, and then all of a sudden seeing a fish come up. That's become a really fun part of the sport for him. And I think back to me and watching that perch come and bite it. And then how does this affect other parts of fishing that we can do? I think when we can use those visuals, I think it can make fishing even more fun for us. And I'm gonna assume that we go fishing for the fun, not just for the meat and not just for winning a tournament, but for most of it, me included, it's for the fun. So that's why fly fishing with dry flies that float on the water can be, for a lot of people, more rewarding because it's more fun than fishing with submerged flies like nymphs or wet flies or streamers. Still a lot of fun, but there's a difference. You see the fly floating down the river, and all of a sudden, there's a splash at the fly, and you know a fish has come up and hit it. That's the crescendo of the experience. And then let's take it even more basic. Let's say we're a kid or whatever, and we're fishing with a bobber, a float. And so we can't see our bait being bit by the fish, but what we can see, we can watch the bobber. And the experience almost becomes watching the bobber, waiting, and all of a sudden you see it dimple on the top of the water. It starts to dimple. It starts to weave and dimple a little bit. It doesn't necessarily go under, but you know there's something causing that. A fish has come up and it's nibbling. And then if it's an aggressive fish, it takes your bait and it runs, and the bobber goes under the water, and we're excited and we set the hook. And that's what fishing can be. Another fun part of fishing, but in my mind, it may be the most fun of all, the visual. And make sure if you're not including that in your fishing repertoire, you might really enjoy it. And one final thought about that. Some of the best fishermen I know that fish for bass, the thing they love is frogging. They call it frogging because they're using these plastic baits that are like frog, and they're on top of the water. And even though they cast them back into the thickest of weeds and so forth, what they're waiting for is that eruption on the surface that means a bass has come up and tried to bite that frog. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report.